Hey everyone, welcome back to the Camino Cafe. I'm so happy to be in season 3 and really excited that Stacey Wittig is sitting here with me because I've been trying to interview her for a long time and our schedules just never jived. And finally today we found a moment to sit down. So thanks so much, Stacey, for coming to the Camino Cafe.
Oh, thank you, Leigh. This is my pleasure.
Oh, well, wonderful. Thank you. And you are in the US right now in Flagstaff, Arizona, a beautiful city.
Yes, I am. I'm happy to be home for a short bit, so about 6 weeks.
Okay, so you were just in Spain and we missed each other. I was sorry that that happened, but you had a pretty big trip recently to Spain as well, right?
Yes, I did. So since January, I've been to Spain twice. The first time to walk Via de la Plata. So that was 6 weeks. And then I went back for a travel writing conference in Andalusia. So I had another 5 weeks in Spain. So I'm very acclimated to Spain right now and can't wait to get back. But
do you have a trip planned?
I don't, but I'm always open. So
okay, cool. So, I don't know that much about your background. Like we kind of have a lot of common friends and everything. So excuse me if I ask something you think, how does she not know this? But I was going through your website and first, I love the Unstoppable Stacey. Like that is a really great nickname. And so my first question is, how did this come about? How did you become Unstoppable Stacey?
Well, I think it's been like over a lifetime of experiences. Of things that have challenged me over my life that I've been able to overcome, one being a traumatic brain injury. And I've been able to, do as much traveling and writing as I do. So in that case, I feel unstoppable. I started travel writing in 2008, and I had a different moniker then. But I was out in California and one of my PR hosts was hosting me. And I said, I need a new name. I need a new brand. I've got my colors. I've rebranded everything, but I need a new name. She goes, it should be something like Unstoppable Stacey. I'm like, oh, perfect. Now this woman probably charges $450 an hour for her marketing services. I have no idea, but I just felt very blessed that she, was able to come up with that. And I went, that's it. So,
boom. And you've really been able, from what I was reading on your website, to attach some meaning to that nothing's holding you back, like being a solo traveler, being a woman, all these different things don't hold you back from traveling. And I think that's a real inspiration.
Yeah, that's one of the things that kind of the goal of my travel website is to encourage women to travel regardless of their family situation. My husband doesn't travel, so I could stay home because my husband stays home. However, I get out there and travel, and I don't want to, think back over my life and go, oh, I wish I would have done that. So that's part of the unstoppable thing is I really like to encourage men and women, but a lot of women have more of that fear or anxiety of travel, even going on the Camino, which I think is very safe and a perfect place to begin your solo travels.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right. I think everybody sometimes has a little nervousness about even going out to dinner by yourself or going to a movie. And so when you say, hey, fly to another country on your own, that can be a little unnerving at first until you do it and you get used to it, right?
Right. Well, and even me, as much as I travel, I still get those Camino butterflies. Before I go, I'm like, oh, should I be doing this? Why am I doing this? What's happening? And then of course, once I get on the plane, I'm fine at that point. But I think we all, have a bit of anxiety to undertake such a big and meaningful thing in our lives.
I agree. And I think that kind of shows the meaning behind it, right? If we weren't a little nervous, then it really wouldn't be something that's transformative. So that's pretty normal, I think, to be nervous, but sometimes we don't like that feeling of nervousness, do we?
Exactly.
So now did the traveling Stacey come first before the Camino, or did the Camino kind of spur this Unstoppable Stacey as far as travel and travel writing? I don't know what year your first Camino was.
So that's a really great question. I have always traveled. So I grew up in a family that did the car camping, the summer road trip from Minnesota to California, from Minnesota to Montreal. You know, I say that traveling is in my blood because my father is a Viking. My father's Norwegian. So I say it's in my blood. I was working for a Fortune 500 company. I had the golden handcuffs. I couldn't leave my job, even though I was working 80 hours a week. I was making fantastic money. It was killing me. And I felt called in 2005 to take myself on a spiritual retreat. So I ended up driving out to Pasadena, sat there with a book, St. Teresa, 10 days with St. Teresa. But because I am such a type A personality, I'm going to do it in 3 days. So in 3 days, I do my St. Teresa studying, and I came back home and I said, Dan, I feel like the Lord is calling me to do the Camino. And he said, go, just go. He was so worried that he was going to find me, you know, laying dead at my desk. So he has been very supportive ever since 2005 was my very first Camino.
Very first one. So this Camino, or this pilgrimage, or I guess retreat that you did for St. Teresa, was that one you just designed?
Well, I had a book. So there was a book, 10 Days with St. Teresa. And I'm very much into contemplative prayer and spirituality. And so that's why I have gravitated over the years to St. Teresa, because she's such a great mystic and she has such amazing power in being a woman, and really has that connection to the Lord that helps me connect. And so there was a book and I just went. So I was in a hotel room in Pasadena.
I love it. So you just designed your own retreat based on this book. And I love that, being the type A personality, that you did 10 days in 3 days. And I'm sure you did every second of what needed to be done in those 3 days. It wasn't like you cut it short in 3 days.
Exactly.
I love it. So now, how did you know about the Camino at this point? Had a friend gone, or?
So no one, you know, in the US, the Camino was relatively unknown.
Right.
But like I said, I was a traveler. So in 1995, I took my very first trip to Spain, and I visited a girlfriend who was doing a semester in Spain in Granada. And so I went for her spring break. Well, her spring break happens to be Semana Santa, you know, so the Holy Week.
Right.
And I've never been to Spain before. I'd spent a lot of time in Italy and Germany and, you know, around, but never Spain. We were headed to Portugal. So she was wrapping up her classes. I'm hanging out with all the students, and there's these people putting on backpacks and leaving. I'm like, well, where are you guys going? We're going to Portugal. Where are you going? Well, we're going on the Camino de Santiago. And I'm like, what? What's that? And they kind of told me. But if you think way back to 1995, we had an internet, but you could never find anything on it. You couldn't bookmark. It didn't translate. It was, you know, so I went home and I was like, okay, I need to find out about Camino de Santiago. Well, I couldn't, and there was no books in the library. So it kind of, you know, went out of my mind. So 10 years later, here, I feel like the Lord is going, Stacey, remember the Camino de Santiago. And so at that point, then there was a lot on the internet, and I found a great guidebook, and, you know, the rest is basically history. Changed my life. I'm total Camino addict now. So.
Yes. Did you ever imagine, when you found those first books, that you would in turn start writing guidebooks for Camino routes yourself?
Never. No, I never thought of that.
Did you write any? Were you an author before you started doing those books?
No, so I was, you know, I was working 80 hours a week. I was total, you know, crazy person, but I loved to write. And the only place I could write was on the seat of an airplane, because that's the only time I had. So my time was always packed out. But when I was on the seat of an airplane, I could write. And so when I finally did leave my job, I thought, okay, now it's time to reinvent myself. I've always wanted to write, and I write best from the seat of an airplane. I think I'm going to take a stab at this travel writing. So that's how that kind of went. And then the guidebook thing was on my very first Camino. When I was young, I backpacked. So I was a wilderness backpacker.
Okay.
So I knew I couldn't take very much weight. So I went on Amazon and I'm looking for a daily devotional that I could read every day on the Camino, some scripture verses so I wouldn't have to take a Bible, because back then we didn't have online Bibles.
Right.
We didn't really have a phone to carry any of this stuff. And I wanted a journal. So I thought, well, that somebody must have written that. There's got to be that out there. Well, no, there wasn't. So because I was looking for such a thing, when I got back, I would be doing my morning devotionals, and I felt like the Lord would say, okay, Stacey, this scripture is for the devotional. I'm like, what? So I'd write it down. And then, a week later, this scripture is for the devotion. I'm like, what devotional? So that's how I came to write my very first book, which was the daily devotional scripture verses for the stretch from Leon to Santiago, because most Americans can only take 2 weeks. And that's a really good stretch, especially back then, right? For doing the Camino for US people. And so I put all those elements together, and now there's such a thing out there, and it sells pretty well. So I'm excited about that.
Yes. And how many books total have you written? I was trying to figure that out earlier.
I think five Camino guides, and 4 of them are daily devotionals. So one of them I wrote with Johnny Walker, and it was published by the Confraternity of St. James. And so that's not a spiritual guide. Okay. But I really fleshed out all the history and culture for the Camino Primitivo. Okay. That book had originally been just a turn-by-turn guide. And now Johnny said, oh, well, this is the best Camino Primitivo book out there. But I think it's because of all that history and culture that I took about 9 months to research. So it was a very fun project. I loved that project.
Wow. Okay. Well, I will put links to all the books in the show notes, so that way anyone that's listening, if they want to check them out, they'll be able to get to them.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So let's go back to that first Camino. So you do this retreat on your own, you're feeling the tap, you say, I'm going, your husband says, go do it. You're still working at this point, but 80 hours a week, you're getting a little burned out. And were you in the travel industry at that time, or was it something completely unrelated to travel?
No, I was actually working for the phone company.
Oh, okay.
And I was selling Yellow Page advertising.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was the person in Flagstaff, Arizona at that point, and I had 700 customers that I had to see before the deadline, because you publish a book, there's a deadline for book publication. So yeah, it was great. It was crazy.
Oh my goodness, that does sound crazy. Okay, so you hop the plane. This has been something you've heard about back in 1995. You find a little bit of information by the time you're going. Well, no, I guess that was it 95 when you visited your friend?
When I first heard about it.
And so you found a few books, not that many, but some at this time, and you arrive. And I just wonder, I know we try not to have expectations, of course, but I imagine you had some. Once you got here to Spain, that first Camino, you were on the Frances, I'm assuming, on the first one?
Yes. Yeah. So I started in Leon, and I walked to Santiago on my first pilgrimage.
So what met your expectation? And then what was kind of like, wow, I did not see that coming?
That's a good question too. Okay, so the first thing that pops into my mind is I flew in. I'm trying to figure out where I ended up. I ended up on the coast.
Okay.
and I can't remember the name of the town, which I should. However, I took the train into Leon, and
Okay.
I was thinking, well, there's supposed to be all these pilgrims. And I had told my mother, who was quite worried about me, well,
Sure.
it's just like going to YMCA camp. All my friends are there. I just haven't met them yet. So
Yes.
that was my expectation, right? Like, I'm going to go on this Camino, and on the train, I'm going to see people with their backpacks. And I get to Leon, I haven't met one pilgrim yet. So I go to the cathedral, and I'm sitting, in front of the cathedral and the plaza there, and marveling. And I see another pilgrim, and she's from Norway. And so I
Mm.
sit down with her and I tell her the story, and she goes, "Oh yeah, you're like wondering, where are all my friends?" I said, "Exactly." So that was, and of course, after that, then I'm on the pilgrim trail, and there's plenty of pilgrims, and I'm meeting pilgrims, all the way. Um,
Yes.
so that's the first thing that pops into my mind about expectations.
Yeah, we do have that expectation of making friends and this family and all these things that are going to happen. But I'm guessing you probably quickly found that you didn't walk that often alone, or there was usually somebody behind you, usually somebody ahead of you. It
Yeah.
has that been your experience, other than maybe the less populated routes here in Spain?
That is, definitely that was my experience on the Frances the first go
Yeah.
around. And then, I've done lonelier stretches.
Yes.
So I've done, plenty of stretches where I'm the only one. In fact, I was in Italy last November and December and walked for 5 weeks on the Via Appia,
Yeah.
headed south out of Rome, and walked down to Bari, which is on the Adriatic Ocean. So I basically walked across Italy and ran into one other pilgrim, and we were crossing. So
Oh
we,
my goodness.
yeah, so he was coming from the very tip of the boot of Italy, and
Yes.
his plan was to walk 36 months. So had just started out, and we crossed paths, which was a total God thing that we met, because he was able to direct me around a really big flooding area that he had just walked through. He was a really tall Spanish dude.
Yeah.
And he said that the water was up to his thighs. And so if I would have walked, it was probably like 10 miles to that crossing. And
Yes.
the water, normally there wasn't water there, but that's how much flooding was at the time.
Oh
So,
my goodness. Oh my
so it was a
goodness.
blessing that I had walked with him, or, walked by him.
Trail angel right away,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What did that feel like to not be seeing pilgrims for that long of a period?
It
I mean, you're a
was,
seasoned walker, but that would still feel odd to me.
it did. And it was, I knew that it was going to be a lonely walk. I knew, I was in my mind, I was planning on it being a real time of contemplation and more of a pilgrimage kind of for myself. Whereas a lot of the pilgrimages I go on, I feel like that's my mission. I'm going for other pilgrims that I might meet. But
Yeah.
this one, I knew it was going to be lonely. But you were in Europe during last November and December. It rained so much. So it was unseasonable rain. So all that rain, walking in the rain and walking in the rain and walking in the rain alone was very difficult. So it was very much of a struggle. And I've walked in the rain on Camino del Norte, but there's other people there, and we encourage each other, and oh man, that rain was something, it's fun to talk about. But when you're alone, it's a way different thing. And yeah, I really had to pull into that unstoppable Stacey, like, I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah. Was that your mantra? And, were there certain things that you were doing? Because walking in the rain like that many days by yourself with no one else being in it with you to kind of, complain about, or,
Right,
feel like
right.
we're in this together. So what did you do? Because I think that is something that can happen to us on any trail, right? Like, we think it's going to be glorious weather, we show up, and especially at the end of the Camino, it's Galicia, right? It's going to rain.
Right.
So what did you tell yourself, or what did you do that you think helped you get through that challenging time?
Well, the beauty of that trail is that it's very supported by the local people. And
Okay.
so many of the local people have done the Via Frangia, or they have done the Camino de Santiago. And so they are Camino angels. They're welcoming you into their homes, or they're, helping you find places to stay. So I had that all planned before I went.
Okay.
And so I knew that I had to get to the place, right? There wasn't, it was so remote in southern Italy that in many places I couldn't even hitchhike, right? I had to walk it. If I wanted to get to my bed that next night, I had to walk it. And I also knew that people were expecting me to get there. So that was, kind of the I guess the goal or whatever of the day.
That goal
But
of the day to get to bed, to get to where you were supposed to be and have a bed. That's a pretty good motivation.
right, exactly.
Were
So,
you
but it was a
ill?
beautiful time. It was amazing time with the Lord and with these people, because you can imagine just how happy you are to be with these local people, and what a slice of life for me to be able to see their lives. Um, one of the gal's fathers taught me how to make limoncello. Other people were cooking and showing me how to do things. I made my very first Italian coffee on my own, because I was in a bed and breakfast where I had to use, the little coffee thing but I just Googled it and said, okay, how do I use this thing? So, yeah, and it was a beautiful cup of coffee. I have to pat myself on the back.
That's
But
wonderful.
just those experiences are so rich. And the people's faith and some of the holy spots that I went to were just amazing. So,
Wow. Can you think of one in particular that if someone is going to walk that route, that you'd be like, do not miss this?
I think you would hit them all, like you walk that route, you won't be able to miss them. But just walking out of Rome alone, the Via Appia is called one of the most beautiful walks in the world. And so I stayed with the sisters just outside the Colosseum and spent a couple days in Rome, was able to go to St. Peter and get a stamp, and then started walking, on the third day. And that was just beautiful and gorgeous.
Wow,
So,
that sounds like an amazing experience.
yeah, it was.
Okay, so we go back to the Camino. And so you walk that first Camino from León to Santiago, and you find right away that you're going to make friends. And so the first expectation is fulfilled. And did you find that you had any big challenges beyond the norm on that first Camino?
I think, I think I just had the normal pilgrim challenges, like packing too much,
Yes.
carrying way too much. Like I said, I'd been a wilderness backpacker. In the US, we're taught, be prepared, like the Boy Scout thing, be prepared. But in Spain, you don't have to be prepared. If you left your toothbrush in the last albergue, you're going to walk by a store, at least on the Frances.
Yes.
And, so you can replenish all along the way. But the other thing that I had in my mind was that I'm on a pilgrimage. I'm going to be sitting in my bunk, reading my books or reading my Bible every night. I had no idea there was this whole social thing. So, I was out having dinner, drinking wine, getting to know people from Norway, Amsterdam, all over the world. And so that I had packed too many books. So of course I could mail them all ahead. So in those days, there weren't really the transit companies to send your things ahead. But of course, the Correos, the post office in Spain, does a great job at that.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh, they
I
do.
sent everything, all my books to Santiago. So that's, like overcoming those kind of things. I'm trying to think I even had the first day I had to ask these guys, and you're a brand new pilgrim and all these seasoned pilgrims are marching by you, right? Because they started in Saint Jean. And of course, they know you're a newbie because they can tell by how much you're packing or whatever. And so,
Right.
please, can you help me adjust my hiking poles? Like I had new poles and I couldn't even figure out how to adjust them. Maybe I'd bought them in Spain or something. I don't really remember, but I remember just, having to put myself out there in a very humble way to say, I don't know how to do this. So,
Yeah. And what was the response you got from folks?
like from those guys, they helped me do it, but you could tell they were kind of like, what, this woman brought her hiking pole, she doesn't know how to use them. So
Right. When we become seasoned pilgrims, sometimes we forget what it's like to be a newbie, right?
exactly. So that's why I always try to be the Camino angel for other people. And so typically I'll bring, I kind of call it like emergency food, but I
Yeah.
always pack food with me in case something happens where I can't get food. And if I see somebody who's like overheating or they're struggling, I've got water for them. I've got that food for them. I always carry extra ibuprofen. I always carry extra foot bandage stuff. And
Wow.
so on some of my walks, I was actually called like Nurse Stacey. So I really try to do that. I try to look out for people's health like you can see on people's faces. I think especially being from Arizona, I know when people are overheating. I know how to, help with that problem, which is drinking more water and eating. And
Yes.
it's hard to eat when you feel like you're going to puke. So
Yes. Right. And we've definitely had that problem this year with some of the heat waves.
yeah, it was crazy.
Crazy. Can you think of a particular time where Nurse Stacey jumped in and was the Camino angel for someone?
Well, I'm thinking of one of the times that I went up out of Saint Jean and
Mhm.
did that crossing of the Pyrenees.
Yeah.
And there's so many people, like students in particular, like either they're doing a gap year and or maybe they were going to school in Europe. I remember this Korean gal, and now she's carrying all her stuff from school. So she completed her school and now she's got it all on her back and she's trying to get over the Pyrenees. And so I could tell that she was struggling. And
Right.
so I sat down with her and I basically, like heard her story. I always like to listen. And so I was listening and I really tried to let her know that it's okay not to take everything, that it's okay to let's maybe find somebody that can ship this ahead for you. Because
Yeah.
at Orison, they do have a place where you can ship ahead. And so they just have a car that, they drive it up there for you. But so that kind of thing, to sit down with someone and just listen to their story and then offer some simple advice.
Yes.
Another time there was a brother and a sister, and they're from the US, and they were walking up that stretch. And he was overweight. And I sat down next to him and he said, "Yep, I'm doing this Camino to lose weight." I go, "Well, good for you. That's awesome. But really, I'm from Arizona. I know about water. You need to drink more water." "Oh, I've been drinking my water. I brought plenty of water." I go, "Well, you can't just bring it. You got to drink it too." So I was able to, like Nurse Stacey was able to say, "Okay, here, drink some more water," and really kind of be his mom because he was that age. He was the younger brother. And so so I think that was probably the Camino that I earned the Nurse Stacey thing. But later on, when I met them later on, he was very thankful. And we had that bond then with me and the siblings. So,
The siblings. So if you had to count up all the Caminos, how many do you think you've done at this point?
I think I've done 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
impressive.
starting in 2005, say I'm old. Of course I've done, a
You're not
lot.
old.
But I usually try to kind of shut up about that, because I don't, you know, when I'm walking, I
Mhm.
typically don't try to put it out there that how many I've done,
Right,
but
right.
the question usually typically does come up.
It does, doesn't it? I think I've been asked that so many times. How many have you done? Where did you start? And I always say to people, no matter where you say you started, there's always going to be someone that started further back, right? Like,
Sure.
and no matter how many you've done, there's always someone else, but I don't know. For me, I wonder if you feel this way. I love the ones I haven't done not nearly as many as you have, but I still feel like my first one will always be the one that's most dear to me. The one I seem to remember, really well. Do you feel that way? Or was there another one that was like, no, this was the one that helped me change or transform more?
Um, well, people will always ask me what my favorite is. And so my favorite Camino, the best experience that stands out among them all is the Le Puy route. So from Le Puy-en-Velay in France to Santiago. So what happens is, for people who haven't done that, you walk for a month in France.
Mm.
And then a lot of people will drop off. So a lot of the French people, they'll stop in Saint-Jean. But there were 3 of us that continued on then to Santiago. And my I kind of I leave my Caminos up to what happens. So I don't, yeah, on that Camino, I didn't really think that I would get to Santiago. I I wasn't trying to do that.
Mhm.
However, 2 of the French guys that I was with, one of them said, you have to walk to Santiago with me. You have to, like, and I said, well, we'll see what happens. No. And so he planned it out. Well, by that time, we'd been walking 5 weeks. We were really in good shape. So we could really do a lot of kilometers. We were, and it wasn't hard to do. So we're still in that, nice Camino pace. So
Right.
I arrived in Santiago on that one, which was surprising for me, but very special. So that
Yeah.
was my definite favorite Camino. And it's probably because I spent 2 months, right? There's lots of elements to that, but I
Yeah.
love walking in France. A lot of times I will schedule to walk at least a week in France before I hit the Spanish border. And
Wow.
so,
I've heard that a lot about the Lipui, and I wonder, and for you, what makes that so special for you? What is it about the French route that in France that makes you feel like, boy, I'm going to take an extra week to make sure I hit it again, or at
okay.
least hit an area in France?
Yeah. So part of that is that it's more remote. So you're
Mm,
not running into a lot of pilgrims. When you start walking the Camino back in 2005, I know people who've started way before I ever did, but it was just very different. And so there weren't as many pilgrims, and you have more of a chance um, to experience a different culture, experience yourself
yes.
in a different culture, to have that stillness and the contemplation. And so that is typically, that's a big reason why I start with at least a week.
Okay.
And so I was able to do that starting in Lourdes. So Lourdes, France, you can walk a week to Saint-Jean. It's a beautiful route.
Yeah.
It's totally amazing. And I wrote a spiritual guidebook about that one. And
Mm,
at that point, it was the only English guide for that section.
wow.
So even I write spiritual and walking guides. So they're different than just a regular guidebook. But at that point, the spiritual and walking guide was the only guide in English. And I think it still is. So
Is the terrain a lot like it is right around Saint Jean, with kind of the rolling hills,
yes,
wooded and green?
yes. So you're walking along the sides of the Pyrenees. So the Pyrenees basically run, approximately north and south. And
Yeah.
so at that point in Lourdes, you're south, and now you're walking along the
Oh,
Pyrenees. and you can go to Saint-Jean, or you could deke over and go over the Pyrenees down at that part as well.
Okay.
And so,
Yeah.
there, there's so many different routes. That's what I love. It's, fascinating to me.
There's so many. I just interviewed someone that started the Camino Croatia, and they were telling me about all the routes in Croatia. So, I mean, it's just endless, I think, what we could go and do, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you find that that week alone, say going from Lourdes to Saint-Jean, kind of gets you into that Camino mood? Because I feel like for me, sometimes it takes a few days, right, to kind of really let go and
Oh,
get
yeah.
yeah.
So just that whole, leaving behind our American pace, we're just so driven in the US. We have a different mindset. And a lot of times you don't really understand that until you go to Europe and you see this joy of living and this taking your time. Oh, there's a friend, let's stop and talk. Okay, so I'm late for my next appointment, but I'm having this experience with my friend that I just ran into. Or the long dinners and the wine and just that love of life and the appreciation of each other. And so I think it does take a while
Yeah.
to leave that fast pace behind and get into the pilgrim lifestyle.
Right. I agree. Wow. Okay. So, what route are you still hoping to do in Spain? Is there another one, or another one in France or somewhere else that you're like, okay, this is the bucket list?
Oh, yeah.
For me.
My biggest bucket list one is the St. Olavsveg. So I
Oh,
mentioned that I'm Norwegian, half
yes.
quarter only, but so you can start at the Arctic Circle on St. Olavsveg and walk to Trondheim and then continue down into Santiago. Now, I can't remember exactly, but I think that takes 6 months to walk. So I would probably, I'm, like I said, I go for 5 weeks in Italy or 5 weeks in Spain. That's the time my husband allots. He goes, after 5 weeks, that's about it.
It wants you back.
So I would envision myself, in Norway for 5 weeks, but I think I need to find someone to do that with. So typically I'm a solo. I'm a solo pilgrim, but I think with that one, you have to carry tents and it would be, not as supported. I don't know if I'll ever do that in my lifetime, but that's a bucket list thing. The one that I'm kind of being drawn to now is the Ignatian way,
Yes,
which
me
is
too.
Ignatius of Loyola. He started the Jesuit order,
Yes.
and I have been studying him for the last couple years, and so I'm drawn to that. And I kind of felt the same way about that route, that it wasn't supportive enough. I would have to find somebody to do it. But after doing that Italian route, I'm like, I could do it. Like I I could do that. So now I feel confident about being able to do that solo. There's also a route that goes from the coast down to Leon. And there's a couple names for that, which I can't come up with right now, but
Yeah.
It's not San Salvador. It goes more east up to the coast, and that goes through Pico de Europa. And I love walking in the Alpine, and so that's another one where I feel like maybe I could do that one solo now. But Rebecca Scott has written about that one for the Confraternity of St. James. So if anyone's interested in that, you can go to their site, and it should be easy to find. But this is kind of a good segue into my Wisconsin way.
Now, I'm wanting to head there.
It is when you say, what do I want to do? So I have never done the Vézelay route. And Vézelay route, you could take it from the Belgian border. it's further north of the Lepuy route, and then it goes, and it's one of the ancient ways. It's one of the documented ancient ways that goes down to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. And so I had been studying several books, several guides. I had my French Michelin guide out. I was marking everything up. I bought my tickets to go in 2020, and then Norwegian canceled my flight because of COVID. So I had been hopeful that, COVID through 2020, I was thinking, the flu would go down in the summertime, and then it probably wouldn't resurge until maybe December is what I was projecting. So no, I got canceled out. I think it was September.
Wow.
So that made me think, okay, I can't go to Europe. What about that Wisconsin way? I heard about the Wisconsin way from a priest in 2016 at an American Pilgrims on Camino gathering. So
Okay.
every year, American Pilgrims on Camino have an annual gathering. We have great speakers. And
Yes.
Father Kurz was one of the speakers. And
Okay.
so he had given me a t-shirt and had talked to me a little bit about writing a guidebook for that. But there was another woman there who said, no, I'll write the guidebook. So I'm fine. I have plenty of projects to do.
Right.
And so now fast forward 2020, I think I'm going to go try that Wisconsin way. So I went to the website figuring I'm going to download a PDF. I'm going to download the guidebook. I'm going to, get information. Well, there wasn't that much information. And so I ended up calling Father Kurz and finding out that no, a guidebook had not yet been written. And so I did my very first Wisconsin Way pilgrimage from outside the Green Bay area down to outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So that's 154 miles. That's being developed right now. And then the next section would take you all the way to La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is on the western side of the state. And that would be about 500 miles. So this Camino is loosely based on, I call it an American Camino, the Wisconsin way. It's loosely based on the Camino de Santiago. And it's being basically developed. We're trying to find more people to bring people into their homes, bring, pilgrims into their homes to be supportive. There are bed and breakfasts for the closer you get to Milwaukee, then there's more support, more places to stay. But
Okay.
I say the way is made by walking. And so the more pilgrims we can get to walk the Wisconsin way, the way will be more developed. So.
Wow. Okay. I have so many questions about it because especially during COVID, we had so many people that wanted to get out and walk, and, we couldn't travel for so long. And I think there's a lot of interest in this, but not a lot of knowledge about the Wisconsin way, that it even existed. So could we back up a little bit and just say, why does it, how did it come about? Is it a religious pilgrimage of some sort?
So it is a religious pilgrimage, but
Okay.
you do not have to be Catholic to walk it. You do not have to be religious to walk it. It's
Okay.
very similar to the Camino de Santiago, that you can be agnostic, deny God, whatever. Everyone is invited to come and walk this way.
Right.
So I have to footnote this with saying that I'm not Catholic, so I don't know all the right words for, but
Right.
this is my perception.
Okay.
Because there is only one Marian shrine in the United States that's approved by the Catholic Church.
Okay. Yes.
A Marian shrine is, for the people that don't know, is a place where Mary has appeared to human beings and given them some sort of message. It's usually encouragement. And so that was like in Lourdes, France. Mary appeared there. That's a Marian shrine. But there's only one in the US that's approved by the Catholic Church. So it goes through this big approval process with the bishops and with this, and, there's certain check boxes they have to check. So that's where the Wisconsin Way starts. It starts at this Champion, Wisconsin. It's a place where Mary appeared to a peasant girl in the 1800s. And so he was from Belgium. And that whole area of Wisconsin was settled by Belgians. Originally, the French explorers were there. So there's a lot of French speakers, a lot of French names. When you walk that area, you taste Belgian pastries. You get this whole European kind of sense as you go to these different churches. Well, this Marian Shrine in Champion, Wisconsin, they had a farm. She was carrying a bag of grain to the mill when she saw Mary appear to her 3 different times on 3 different walks. But so this place is very simple. It's very humble. It's a very humble beginning. And as you walk this path, 154 miles, you come across these other, what in my book I call holy hotspots. So there are places where there's a certain spirituality about them. There you can feel the Holy Spirit if you're in tune to that sort of thing. If you're not, there are great historical places, right? So a lot of these places that have great history behind them. And as you walk, like I said, out of this Belgium area and then into a Bohemian area. So this was all settled by Bohemians, which is now Czechoslovakia, but right outside of Germany. And the churches are just fabulous. They're like small country churches that you would see in Bavaria, or, very similar.
Wow.
And so then after you walk through that area, then you come into where the Germans settled. And so now you're getting German food and sausages, and there's roadside cheese houses, and there's a vineyard you walk through. And so it's very Camino-like.
Wow.
It's a great experience. You are walking you start out in farm country, so very little support whatsoever. But in the farm section is where you go through the vineyard. Then you enter the forest section, and the forest section overlays the National Ice Age Trail. The National Ice Age Trail is you can look it up online, but it's an amazing trail that follows the formations that were left by the glaciers. So you're up and you're down and you're up and you're down, and beautiful forest lands and little tiny single track trails that you're all on this stones, like from glacial moraines. The stones don't slide because they're all compacted, but you're walking these stony paths. And then I did it first in the fall. So just the beautiful fall colors are just so amazing. In my book, I talk about a lot of those glacial formations. So as you're walking, you're learning a lot about the history, the geology, the spirituality of this place. And then finally, when you're coming up out of this forest section, which I think is 4 days, you end up at Holy Hill. So Holy Hill is a cone that was formed by the glaciers, and on top of it is a cathedral. And so you go from very humble beginnings in Green Bay, Wisconsin, walk 154 miles through this changing scenery and topography, and then you end up on this high point. And many people in the Midwest know Holy Hill. It's a place of pilgrimage. Not so many walking, but this is, I don't know if you can see this picture, but
yeah, right there. Yeah.
There, yeah, okay, so that's a picture of Holy Hill, but you could Google that as well. And so it just makes a beautiful end to your pilgrimage.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so Stacey was holding up the cover of her book, which is a picture of Holy Hill, which I had no idea, and it's gorgeous. So I will make sure to post that in the show notes. There will be a link so everyone can take a look at that. Well, I think Wisconsin's a beautiful state to start with, right? In many areas. So you've got me super excited about this. So a couple of questions to you, because I'm imagining some people listening are going to be how I'm feeling right now, like, oh, I'd like to do this. This 154 miles, is it possible to walk it all the way through? Like, can you walk, say, 8 miles and find somewhere to stay? Is it stageable in a way, or do you sometimes have to take a car because where there's not quite the infrastructure built yet?
Okay, so it's laid out in 11 different stages,
Okay.
but some of those stages are very long. And
Right.
so depending on how physically active you are and how much walking you've done, if you do a lot of walking, it's very doable. A 20-mile day is doable. However, for most people, that's a lot.
Right. Especially back.
Yes. So in my book, I talk about how you could do it as a shuttle. So I met 3 women that had a RV, and the 3 women would camp in their RV and then leave the RV. The 3 of them would walk together. Halfway through the day, one would turn around, go back with the keys, pick up the RV, and then meet the other 2 at the end of the stage. And so you could do that. You could just switch off drivers, right? So that's a really great way to do it.
Yes.
So if you were solo, you could also take a car and do it that way. You just do whatever you feel comfortable walking and then walk back to your car.
Yeah.
But you really, what I stress for anyone thinking this, you have to have all your accommodations set up before you go. There's not very many accommodations. And so if you feel comfortable, you can call the parishes along the way and ask if they have a family you could stay with. There are bed and breakfasts that I've outlined in the book that work really well with this. But again, those are few and far between until you reach about the halfway point, and then accommodations become much easier.
All right. Well, a lot of us have that dream of owning an albergue. So one question that's always been burning to ask you, is this an area that's possibly ripe for we Camino freaks that would like to have that albergue lifestyle, but of some sort, whether it's a guest house or a bunk bed? But is that a possibility that if a lot of folks started kind of pulling together, could you see that happening down the road?
Definitely. I definitely see that happening. And Father Andrew Kurz, who's the, visionary of this project, he sees that, and he's always on the hunt for the perfect albergue. So he's, looking at real estate and is, like tapping me on, oh, Stacey, here's this great place.
Yeah.
And that's really what's needed right now. I'm not in a situation where I would want to do that. It's very tempting, but the country is beautiful, and it would be a great place to buy a little farmhouse or buy, a larger place in one of these smaller towns and host the pilgrims that are coming through. So yes, we are looking for people that would be interested in doing that. And it's a lovely lifestyle. I met people along the way that had moved from San Francisco, had moved from other major population areas, and were living there and farming and doing the country thing. So
Wow.
yeah, it's amazing. Like you said, Wisconsin is a beautiful, beautiful state.
Right.
And I grew up in Minnesota, so I thought I knew Wisconsin because, I was right next door. But I had not spent time over on that eastern side, which is really close to Lake Michigan, really close to, a lot of great history and beautiful, beautiful terrain.
Wow. Well, I'm even more interested in going now that I've heard you talk about it.
Yeah.
How does Father Kurz have any idea of how many people a year are walking this? I imagine it's hard to track it. Or is there a Compostela of sorts that people?
We're talking about there's a committee, and we only meet once a year, and we're talking about a Compostela. And some people have bought stamps already. So the people along the way there, you get to stay at a monastery. So one of the monasteries has a stamp. And so that's, something in development. Father Kurz does what he calls introduction to the Wisconsin way, where he will take people in his van and drop them off, and then they walk sections and then he picks them up. And it's, I think, a 4-day weekend.
Okay.
But I hate to promote that to Camino people because, we as Camino people, we can do this. He is book solid, right? He's book solid with these because he's doing it on his vacation time, right? So he doesn't have that much vacation time. So he probably takes 8 to 12 people 3 times a year. So that many people are doing it with his Camino.
Yeah.
And then I would say maybe 4 or 5 people other than that.
Wow.
From my perspective, and I'm not there.
Right.
Maybe it's up to 10 people. There is a woman near Holy Hill that takes her youth group. So she's the youth leader at one of the Catholic churches in Slinger. Eileen does pilgrimages. And so she'll take 8 to 12 people probably. And so there's all those people that are walking it as well. But if that kind of gives you an idea, there's not a lot of people walking it right now.
Right. So that could give some of us Camino folks, right, that didn't walk before 2000, an idea of what it's like to go on pilgrimage before it gets big and before there's tons of infrastructure, right? Wow, thank you for all that, Stacey. That is fascinating. We could probably just do a whole call just on that, but I really appreciate you talking about that. And I will soon be bringing some folks on to talk about the Seneca Nation, because I also am very interested in that. So soon, because I hope to have something on that before too long. But wow, we're right at our time. So I guess I could talk to you forever. I think you have so many great stories. I wonder, just to close, I'm just really touched by how, all of this kind of came about, and how your story, you've really had a journey from those days of your corporate job to now becoming this travel writer, this Camino enthusiast. If I were to have met you prior to that first Camino, how would I find you different today than that gal who was overworked, and to the girl that's sitting in front of me that clearly just seems so full of life to me right now? How is she different?
I think I just have so much more peace now. And so just that inner sense of peace, the inner sense of trusting in the Lord that I don't have to make things happen. That's still part of my personality. I'm still have to practice every morning prayers of letting go and letting God, and getting rid of anxiety of all the things that I have to do, because I do have a big list. But I do take time now. I take more time with people. I said that I like that about the European lifestyle. So I feel like that's probably a big difference with me, so work driven, that I had lots of relationships with my clients, but not so many relationships with people outside. So that's probably a big thing.
That's a big thing, a really big thing.
Yeah.
Well, wow. Well, thank you for taking time out to come to the Camino Cafe tonight. I'd love to have you back sometime. I think we could probably talk about so many different things. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I really hope everyone else listening is enjoying it as much as I have tonight. So I'm going to close out the call, but please stay on, and we'll play 20 questions, which people, for me, when I listen to a podcast, pretty much the next thing I do after my walk or my drive is I run home and look the person up. So I want to say to everyone, if you're like me and you want to put a face to a voice, your chance to do this is Stacey and I will be playing 20 questions, and I'll be posting that video on YouTube, so you can go and find out some more information, things we didn't even talk about today. They'll just be quick, fun things. But check that out, and you can put a face to the voice. So check that out if you want. And thank you, everyone, for listening and supporting the work of we Camino enthusiasts, and, well, sometimes I say geeks, but advocates and people that are falling in love. And if you haven't walked yet, I hope that you walk soon. So buen Camino, everyone.
Camino.
I am free, free as a bird now, with my feathered wings. I am free, free as a bird now.